Welcome to another episode on our Series 2 of the Conveyancers for Change podcast. David, would you like to just give our listeners a quick intro to you?
Thanks so much for inviting me on, Vicky. Yeah, my name's David Opie. I run an organisation called Today's Media. Best known part of Today's Media to listeners is probably going to be Today's Conveyancer, which is an online news publication for conveyancers. It's been going for about, 10, 11 years now, if not slightly longer. And we've been doing a huge amount of work around what's going on in the industry at the moment, but also starting to do some horizon scanning around what actually this industry is going to look like over the next 5 to 10 years.
Brill, amazing. And joining us, you might recognise her from Series 1. We've got Katharine. Just in case you missed that episode, go check it out after this one. But Katharine, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hi everyone, I am Katharine Saunders and I am head of the communications team at Aconveyancing. I have been with the company since its inception 5 years ago. I look after all the internal communications and external comms too.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much both for joining us. I would just love to jump straight in and ask each of you, in your words, how would you describe the true responsibilities of a conveyancer? Because I guess if you Google what is a conveyancer or what does a conveyancer do, it basically says they support the legal process of transferring property from one owner to another. But we all know it is much more than that. So, David, how would you describe the true responsibilities of a conveyancer?
Well, they're superheroes, aren't they?
Pretty much, yeah.
If we're going to use a single word, ultimately the conveyancer, if you sort of do the whole features and benefits thing, the conveyancer helps somebody move into their dream home. That's the bottom line, isn't it? That's what they do, and in that vein, a conveyancer is a superhero. No two ways about it. It's been described to me. The day-to-day role of a conveyancer, it's been described to me in the not too distant past as somebody who is ultimately spinning, 15, 20 more plates at any one time and trying to keep them all spinning without dropping them.
I absolutely love that. And I'm sure all the conveyancers listening will love the superhero, the superhero name. Katharine, what about you? How would you describe what it is that a conveyancer actually does?
Without putting myself out of a job, I think conveyancers are the ultimate communicators. They have to be mindful of every single conversation they're having, and being able to switch between talking to a colleague, talking to a client, talking to an estate agent. The list goes on and on and on. So be able to kind of like preempt what that conversation is going to be, what that person wants to get out of that conversation. I would say that is a huge part of a conveyancer's job and what makes them so unbelievably skilled.
So what would you say in terms of if we were to package up like the skills that a conveyancer needs? David, what would you say are the key skills that a conveyancer needs?
I think Katharine's really sort of articulated a lot of the need for that interpersonal skill set. And you've said it as well, Vicky, that it's so important that they're able to communicate with this whole raft of people. That's massive, and traditionally, dare I say, that's not a skill set of a solicitor. A solicitor is very detail orientated, is really very focused on getting the job right. As you said, the role of a conveyancer is to transfer that title from one owner to another properly, legally. So it's almost an alien skill set to a lot of traditional sort of solicitors, and that's so important, so important. So alongside that interpersonal skill, you still have to have that ability to see the detail and to really understand that detail and to communicate that. It's a really challenging skill set for people to have.
It really is, isn't it? And it's one of these where I guess the only way to really learn is on the job. So when you are starting out and you just qualify, that's the best way, isn't it, to get the experience. Katharine, what would you say are the skills to add to David's?
Yeah, I think attention to detail is obviously such a core skill, and like you said, one that you kind of adapt to over time. I think the ability to adapt to changing situations, I think is really important. And I think that's something that the generations coming through the ranks now are really capable of doing. They're very capable of being able to adapt to either different conversations, different scenarios, different technologies. And so, yeah, I think being able to adapt is a huge skill.
And that adaptability, I guess, is essential when it comes to the constant challenges that conveyancers face and that just sort of evolve over time. What would you say currently is the key challenge that conveyancers are facing, David?
There's no 2 days the same, definitely. The key challenge at the moment, I think there's an expectation setting challenge. And we're seeing that you'll have probably talked about that in your podcast with the agents and conveyancers working together. It's about making sure that the end customer, the end home mover, really understands that you're not going to get the contract pack in a matter of hours or a matter of days or whatever the agent has kind of promised at some point. It's about setting those expectations so that the home mover knows at each stage of the process how long it's going to take, where they're up to, and really communicating that to them, but not just to one home mover, not just to 10 home movers. We're carrying case files of 50, 60 people, and you only need to work out, the maths in a day's work. You get a couple of phone calls that take 5-10 minutes each. You've not done any work between 9 and 5. And you see that, inevitably you get conveyancers that are working from 6, 7, 8, in the morning, all the way through to that time at night, because during the day they're not getting the time to do their job.
It's really tough, isn't it? And Katharine, obviously you've been with Aconveyancing since the start 5 years ago. From your experience, what have you seen in terms of like the evolution of challenges, or has there been one thing that is like a constant challenge and stress provider for everyone at work?
I mean, I'm kind of separated from the day-to-day role of a conveyancer, but from what I have seen and the conversations I have kind of been privy to within the industry, I feel like conveyancing and technology are not natural bedfellows necessarily. The process of conveyancing, which has previously and historically been very paper-based, there have been many challenges with transferring that to the kind of digital and online space. So I think the challenge right now is, and we're very much in a kind of test and learn phase, the challenge to the leaders of today is how conveyancers, how the process will eventually either go completely digital or partly digital, or what technology works and what doesn't, and just figuring out that process using technology to the best of our advantages, and how that's going to look in 10 years' time. I think that's one of the biggest challenges today.
I guess this is where the new talent will be really beneficial, because if they are really tech savvy and have that technical expertise, that will be really, really beneficial. So we talked about it earlier. Obviously, it's great to have the detail orientation, adaptability, attention to detail, that tech savviness, but there's always going to be that element of you're going to need to have those interpersonal skills. So how do we help this next generation manage the technical expertise alongside developing those interpersonal skills, that really the requirement for those skills that is never going to go away? David?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? I'm going to get shot down, but dare I say, is there a simplification of conveyancing that is happening? Alongside that, one of the biggest challenges that I see is people actually recognizing that they need support and they need help. It's a very human emotion just to kind of plow on, isn't it? No, I'm fine. I shall deal with it. We've done a podcast about burnout ourselves. Actually, it's so easy to become burnt out but not recognize it in yourself. And it's not about being a snowflake generation. People might sort of say, oh, we younger generation can't deal with it. It's not about that. It's just about recognizing that balance between work, home life, and really putting what's most important first.
Really interesting you say that, and there's actually a lot of podcasts out there at the moment, and it's like is the hustle culture toxic? You know, you sort of have this idea, and especially in the legal world and in conveyancing, where there's so many demands on conveyancers, workload's huge, all the expectations are up here, all these different skills that you need, you've got to perform, you can't put a foot wrong, because what if a complaint comes in and then that goes against the firm? There's a lot of pressures there. And again, this sort of stereotypical hustle, keep working, and a kind of, is it a weakness to ask for help or to put your hand up and say, I don't know what I'm doing here, and you just sort of keep ploughing on, and that can lead to mistakes, it can lead to burnout. So definitely, I guess for firms then, is it that they need to make sure that, well, for new people joining and for new talent and the younger talent, but for everyone there, especially when things are changing so often, that there is that culture that people can put their hand up and they can say, I need some support here. Are you seeing, David, a lot of firms sort of offering that, or do you think there is still this, do you think change still needs to be made there?
I think change is happening. Whether it's happening quick enough, I'm not sure. I don't think the legal sector is alone in needing to change. I mean, you've alluded to the fact that, you know, traditionally it is a very sort of hustle and bustle kind of lifestyle, isn't it? But I am seeing change happening. I'm seeing more than lip service being paid to this, and I think that's probably the biggest compliment you can pay to firms at the moment, is that they are taking this seriously. This isn't one of those things that they've just sort of gone, oh, you know, we can pay lip. You can't. You know, this is about people. Ultimately, it's about people's mental health. It's about their well-being. It's about their ability to do the role. And you know, we learned through the stamp duty, we learned through the pandemic, that you cannot continue to push people and push people and push people. They will break.
And I guess then that responsibility is on the leaders. Katharine, what do you think sets someone aside as a leader?
I think someone who ultimately has empathy, to understand that, and again, I think this has come from, we've learnt this from the pandemic, the ability to that work doesn't always come first, and that actually health and home life are equally as way more important actually for most people than their careers. To have a healthy home life, to have a healthy work-life balance, promotes us to be better, everybody to be better employees. And I think the best leaders are the ones that both recognise that and actually facilitate it. So going back to David's point around burnout, one of the really interesting things that I took from his podcast, he had a guest on talking about burnout, and one of the really interesting points that I took from that was that employers, no longer have, they can't just, it's not a tick box exercise anymore. They actually have to put their money where their mouth is. So it's seeing that change of employers, not just, you know, annually holding a mental health support group or annually holding a menopause training session. It's how you integrate that into the culture of the business. And I think the leaders of today and the leaders of tomorrow are the ones that do that the best.
Definitely. So, and David touched on it earlier, even people can become burnout themselves and not even recognise it, or maybe they do but they don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
So how can a leader, or how does a leader recognise burnout? What are the signs that they should look out for?
I think a leader recognises burnout because they create a culture within their business that allows the person to communicate that. I think, you know, technology is an amazing thing that in so many ways has made our lives easier, but actually I think what it's ended up doing is leaving a lot of us completely overstimulated, which I think is where burnout kind of comes from. And burnout is not a new kind of idea. We just have a name for it now, which I think is really important, because once you kind of name something, it gives people the vocabulary to identify that that's the way that they feel, and communicate that. So I think, obviously as a leader, depending on how big your company is, you can't keep an eye on everybody. But I think creating a culture where people could openly come and talk to you about the fact that they feel burnt out is where the real skill lies.
Definitely. David, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, the perils of going second with these things is that people nick your answer, don't they? But Catherine's absolutely right. It's all about culture. But equally, the challenge with not being in the office every day, and bear in mind that there's a lot of people that are still looking for that flexibility, remote working, all the rest of it. You don't see people face to face every day, and one of the things that we've implemented in our business is a much more proactive approach to just water cooler chat. Every morning we have a stand-up. We're a remote business entirely. Every morning we have a stand-up. So, and we chat about what happened on Love Island. We chat about what happened on at the football yesterday. There is a certain onus on businesses to replicate some of that stuff, because what we found during the pandemic was that you only ever, because we were remote and because we were setting up meetings and video meetings, we only ever chatted about work when we were chatting to other people. We didn't get that breakaway as you might do in the office by going and sitting in the canteen or the kitchen or by the water cooler. And that was a really important realization for us, that we needed that opportunity as a business to do that with our staff.
Definitely. And I think it's one of these things where it's like the more stressful the job and the more difficult that clients can be. And it can be really emotional, obviously, in the conveyancing world as well. If you've got the emotion coming from the clients, if something isn't moving quickly, or if there's been a hiccup in the process and they can't get their keys when they want to. So you absolutely need that relief and that outlet to just talk about something that is not related to work at all. What about for people that might be working from home as well, especially, again, the new talent? Or do you find in conveyancing is mostly, I know in Acon, is there a mix of home workers and people that come into the office? Because again, like you said, David, when you don't see people face to face, there's a danger then that they can just become overworked or sort of out of the sort of social and the nice sort of like cultural loop of firms. What can we do for the people that are working from home?
I think if I can just jump in there with I think like David just talking about what they did as a business, ultimately people are just looking for connection. You can talk all the live long your job, but we're also colleagues, and the way that you build great relationships with people is through that kind of human connection, through that water cooler chat. So, David nails it when he says, having a face-to-face call every morning and just talking about what you had for dinner last night, what you watched on Love Island. It's so easy to kind of fall further and further behind the computer screen. So working from home, having that daily kind of face-to-face catch-up, even if it's on a screen, and just trying to encourage people as much as they can to come into the office, even if it's just for a cup of tea, or to pick up some files, or just to say hello to people.
Definitely.
Sorry.
No, go on, David.
Dare I say, I think technology does have a part to play here as well, from a leader's point of view and from a manager's point of view, because it enables you to track things like productivity. And as a manager, if you are seeing the productivity of your staff go down, then that's an immediate red flag, isn't it? And so, we can be using technology to help us to manage that, file reviews, that sort of thing. We can be using technology to help us with that.
And for the new talent coming in, say you've got someone and you've got people that have, new to qualifying or new to an industry, or they've come from one firm to another, and perhaps they really need to develop their experience in terms of the interpersonal skills, coming back to that again, because that is that really one important skill that is always going to be required from conveyancers. How do we help nurture and support that talent in that area, David?
That's really tough. really tough, particularly in a remote environment, because we've talked about, or we've heard about this phrase, learning by osmosis. And the law is an absolute candidate for that. You sit there, you've sat next to the partner, you've sat next to the fee earner, whoever it might be, and you've learned by listening. And we are not getting that through remote working and working from home. And I think it's not a straightforward answer, but it is about investing in your staff. It's about perhaps investing in sessions, in training, not assuming that everybody can do that. We've done it internally, where we've done sessions on how to write emails. We've done sessions on how to answer the phone. And I'm not, I know at times you sort of sit there and think to yourself, well, that's just teaching grandma to suck eggs. It's not. There is like you say, a new generation of people coming through. Yeah, they're really tech savvy, but they text, or they Instagram, or they don't necessarily email. And that's a massive part of how we communicate as business professionals. So I definitely think that, one, it's very, very difficult, but two, just recognizing it's difficult and investing in your staff around it.
Definitely. Love that. Katharine, what do you think?
I can't better that answer. Sorry. What David says is really interesting, because that kind of idea of leading by example, learning by osmosis, sitting in an office, watching your manager on the phone to people, watching your manager interact, like David says, it's not as, people are still obviously working in offices, but to be able to adapt, to consider, okay, right, let's hold a session on writing an email, let's hold a on how to start a phone conversation, or let's hold a session on how to have difficult conversations. I remember working in an office once where they were like, oh yeah, just send the finance team an invoice, and thinking, what?
What's an invoice?
And genuinely being like, okay, and then just sitting at my screen thinking, what the hell is an invoice? Where am I going to? And just not feeling like I just didn't have the confidence. Again, I don't know what that is. Could you please explain that to me? So, yeah, I think it's striking the balance between, people feeling confident enough to say, I don't understand that, and adapting to the fact that not everybody is sitting in the office next to their manager. And then for leaders, leading by example, so picking up the phone rather than necessarily hiding behind emails all the time.
It's exactly that. And the one word that had sprung to mind when David was just talking, and with you, Katharine, it's confidence, isn't it? And I've been a paralegal, and you have imposter syndrome. You get asked questions, you get asked to do something you don't even understand what was just asked of you. And it is the thing that I wanted from, the lawyers and the associates that I was then, relying on, was just for them to help instill that confidence in me, whether it is just saying, look, this is how you write an email, or this is what I do best, or this is what I found really works. Just little sort of tips, tricks and hacks to build your confidence, because when you start, it is scary, and especially in the conveyancing world, you're sort of thrown in straight away, aren't you? And there's so much going on. And I was always scared to ask the lawyers in my team for help, or if I asked them a question and they replied and I thought, I still don't understand. But I was too scared to ask again, because I thought, oh my goodness, they're too busy. So I guess it is a thing with the leaders as well, just making their staff know I'm here, or if I'm not available, here's some training materials, or here's some resources that you can rely on throughout. So yeah, definitely, it is that confidence building thing. And also, I always used to think, and I don't know about you guys early on in your career, I thought confidence was something that you were born with or you weren't. It took me to get to my early 20s to realise, hang on a minute, confidence is a skill. It is something that, it's not like, oh, she's confident, I'm not, I'm never going to be like that. It's something that you build on. And I guess for leaders then, it's helping the younger generation build on that confidence skill as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And confidence is being able to ask for help. That's confidence. People see confidence as being the person who knows it all, and actually it's not. it's not the person who knows it all, it's the person that can ask for help. So yeah, it's creating that culture where people can ask for help. That's building confidence.
David, what do you think about on the confidence front? Have you always been you just seem very confident. Have you always been a confident person?
We said, didn't we, before the podcast started, I'm really nervous. I've sat in your shoes, or I sat in your seat doing the interviewing bit. That's the easy bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is the more difficult bit, definitely. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, confidence is absolutely a skill that can be learned, and you have to take yourself out of your comfort zone. There's a wonderful inside joke that I share with somebody that used to be a manager of mine, and he came to me a long time ago, and he said, you don't look particularly confident. You really need to step out of this shell that you're in and lead. And he called it the Toby Anstis syndrome. Now, I don't know how many of your listeners will even know who Toby Anstis is.
We'll insert a picture on screen.
Brilliant. Toby Anstis, you never saw him without a smile on his face. He was a children's television presenter, and you never saw him without a smile on his face. And he was always really confident, and he was always really enthusiastic, and we called it the Toby Anstis syndrome. And whenever I went and did something that scared me, we used to sort of message, or we used to say to each other, Toby Anstis. So yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you've just got to break through it and channel that kind of inner confidence. But definitely a skill to be learned.
And what about for the people that are stepping in? Sorry, Katharine, were you going to add something?
Inner Toby.
It's got to be the new thing.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask on that front. Obviously, there's the confidence for the sort of new talent. What about people that are stepping into leadership roles? How do we help the people that are stepping into those roles develop their leadership skills?
This is a personal bugbear, so I'll go first on this one. I have my family have all got backgrounds in professional services, and my father became senior partner at the GP practice by virtue of the fact that he'd been there the longest, and my mother became head of her department at the school by virtue of the fact that, again, she'd been there the longest, or perhaps had displayed a little bit of ambition and had sort of applied for the role. Neither of them entered those roles prepared as leaders, as senior management. And you see it time and time again throughout professional services, and conveyancing is exactly the same. You become a senior partner in a law firm by virtue of the fact that you've been there the longest. You become the head of conveyancing either because you've displayed a bit of ambition or you're a damn good conveyancer. And to my mind, we are not setting these people up for success. And I'm not answering your question, but this is a real drawback. It's a real issue for the leaders of tomorrow. And hopefully something like this podcast and other initiatives that are going on around the place are encouraging people to actually prepare their staff, mold them, groom them into those leadership roles, so that when they reach there, they're ready to hit the straps and go, not be weighed down by, right now you need to learn about all of this stuff.
It's so true, isn't it? And it's one of those where if you've been doing your job as a solicitor and a conveyancer for X number of years, and then you step into a management role, well, where does your being a manager, and even there's a difference, I think personally, with being a manager and a leader as well, which we can come on to. But it is exactly like you say, they're not, unless you have that training somehow, or if you have a leader in your firm that you can look to as a role model and that inspires you and that you'd want to emulate how they've led really successfully. But unless you're actually taught, when you're suddenly put into this management position, what do you do?
It's overwhelming.
Exactly. Katharine, with Aconveyancing, do you know much about how they go about developing people's leadership skills?
No.
Do you want to talk about Natalie?
Sorry, I can't give you an in-depth answer.
No, it's fine.
What the process is, but I think what I do know is that when obviously you've got you identify who has the potential to be a great leader, and as David mentioned, you know, give people the skills to understand that, you know, being a conveyancer and being a leader are actually two kind of separate roles. They do intertwine, but they can be separated as well. So giving people the opportunity to learn how to lead, and training them up in doing so. But then, you know, once they find themselves in a leadership role, giving them the space to be a leader. You know, I think expecting people to do two different jobs full time is where we hear all of a sudden words like burnout. You know, expecting someone to have a full load of case files and be the leader is just not possible anymore. And I think recognizing that leaders need to have the space to be leaders, while also, you know, being on the job, I think is a really important part of structuring the business.
I'm interested. Oh, go on, David.
I was going to say, I completely agree, Catherine. I remember when the Culp Coffer regime first started. Gosh, it's going back 10, 15 years, isn't
What's that?
it? Compliance Officer for Legal Practice and Compliance Officer for Finance and Accounts. So all
That's a lot.
SRA regulated, I know,
Right.
all SRA regulated firms have to have Culps and Coffers, and ABSs have to have Holps and Hoffers, head of legal practice, head of. And it was unheard of at the time that you could appoint somebody that wasn't fee earning. And even the most progressive law firms, it was a really difficult decision for them to recognize that actually the role of a culp or a coffer was a full-time role. You could not give it to somebody and expect them to fee earn. And you know, I remember those conversations vividly, and I think you're absolutely spot on, Catherine. You know, we end up expecting people to manage and run full caseloads, and it's not doable.
Really, really interesting. I'd love to know, this is a little bit off script, so you might want to have a moment to think about it. Has there been a leader in your career that you've thought, oh, they have absolutely nailed it, and that you've really looked up to and you've really felt truly supported, inspired by, or however they've made you feel, but they've had a really positive impact on your career or on you personally? You don't obviously have to name them, but could you maybe talk a little bit about what it is about them and how they led that really had a positive impact on you?
Yes, I do. I used to work at a PR agency in London, and the managing director was a guy called Rao Shah, who is an incredible man, an incredible leader. And two things that I took from Rao was, one, I remember going to the interview for the agency, and he looked at my CV, and by virtue of me being at the interview, I think he already knew that I could do the job and I ticked all the boxes. And in the interview, he pretty much just asked me, like, what do you like to do in your spare time? You know, what makes you, not what makes you interested, but he was interested in who I was as a person. And I just thought that was a really smart way of interviewing someone, in terms of making sure that people fitted the culture of his business. And it really worked for him. He created a really amazing culture within his business of very like-minded and also very non-like-minded people. That's what worked. It wasn't just about, you know, ticking a box and you got in through the front door. He wanted people that were going to challenge other people. And then the other thing he taught me was always have an opinion. So always go to a meeting, always, and he didn't mean it in a kind of like confrontational way. He just meant it as in, if you're going to put yourself in a situation with a client or a third party, like, do your research into who that person is, do your research into what's exciting at the moment, and have an opinion on it so you can talk about it. And those two things I thought were very good pieces of me in good stead. And he was a great leader.
Absolutely love that. Really love that. David, how about you?
Happily, I have two very different things, actually. So we're not repeating each other here, Catherine. I think there are two. You know, to me, I think there are a couple of things that off the top of my head, having not prepared for this question particularly, One is, I think it's somebody that you feel as though you can line up behind. We've done plenty of job interviews. We've all done plenty of job interviews in the past where you sit there and you think to yourself, I couldn't work for this person. I don't like them, or they're toxic, or the way their attitude. You sit there and you think, yeah, I just can't work for this person. And I think you absolutely, if you get a really good vibe around, I could line up behind this person. I think that's a really good sign of a good leader. The second thing that comes to mind is vision. And actually, through a few of the people that I've worked with, it doesn't matter how old you are. You can still set a vision for a business that everybody can get behind, that everybody can understand. And I talk about age because I had a guy that managed me that was probably only a couple of years older than me, and we were friends. I'd count him as a friend, but he led that business because he had this incredible vision for what we were trying to achieve. And similarly, a much older person that managed me, again, just providing everybody with a direction of travel. It's massive.
Whilst we're on the slightly more personal questions based on your careers, what is the best professional advice anyone has given to you, David?
You mean apart from Toby Anstis?
Just leave it, Toby.
Use that one now.
I'm a journalist. In our industry, we have to understand everything that's happening. We have to understand the nuances of our industry. We have to be empathetic to our industry. And the one best piece of practical advice I ever got was to read around what's going on in our world, to spend, and we do. I mean, it's in our ethos anyway as a publication. But even in a previous life, is to really understand what's happening in our world, and to be educated about what's happening in our world. That was the one best piece of advice I ever got, and I stick to it to this day. Every morning, I'm scrolling around some of the news feeds and news channels and just really understanding what's happening in our industry.
The bigger picture, and it's having that curiosity that never goes away, and always learning, reading between the lines. Love that. Katharine, what about you?
The best piece of professional advice I was ever given, which actually kind of feeds into David's answer, is learning the skill of being able to respond instead of reacting. There's a very nuanced difference between the both, particularly in an industry like conveyancing, where it's very fast-paced. It can be very highly stressed, and I think at the core of that is the skill of listening and being able to kind of actively listen, and taking in that information from whoever's giving it to you. So yeah, being able to respond instead of react, I think, is a really important piece of profession.
What is the difference? Just digging a little bit deeper on that.
Reacting is something that you would do, particularly in a world where we're constantly in communication with people over the phone, over emails. Reacting is, one, not really taking in the information that's been given to you and going back with either the wrong information. And then responding is just, say, for example, you get an email through from a very difficult client, taking the emotion out of it, not taking anything personally, going back with the information and the facts. I think it's a real skill to learn how to not take things personally, particularly in a very emotionally charged industry.
David, as well, you mentioned, and Katharine was talking about episodes of your podcast, but we haven't actually introduced that. What is your podcast?
It's very kind of you. Thank you. So today's Conveyance, we've talked about news publication, and we have our sort of finger on the pulse in what's happening in and around the industry. The podcast is an extension of that. We talk to individuals predominantly. We talk about issues of the day. We talk about challenges that conveyancers are currently facing, and we talk about potential solutions as well. like I say, I'm much more used to being sat exactly where you are right
Yeah.
now, because that is a much easier place to be.
And I guess for you then, this is what I love about doing the podcast as well. You're constantly learning, aren't you? You're constantly a student.
This is fabulous. I've already written down half a page of notes from what Katharine said. Yeah, absolutely. And the beauty of podcasts is you can pop them in the car on the way to work, or pop them in your ears as you wander for a walk. We all should be going out for our lunchtime wander now, shouldn't we? Thinking about mental health and well-being. So definitely, and there's some really, really useful stuff that comes out of podcasts.
And yours sounds amazing as well, like you say, for the conveyancers, and circling back to our new talent, or for the people that might not want to ask too many questions, use the podcast and use today's Conveyancer as a resource to gain that knowledge, or something might come up that you think, oh, that might be really useful for our firm. Take it to a leader, or just suck in all the information, and again, it will help build your confidence too. That was fabulous. Any closing remarks on leadership, what maybe the future of conveyancing looks like, Katharine?
I actually just wanted to make a point about David's podcast, about how, and this kind of lends itself to the point that he made about being a journalist, a journalist who works in conveyancing or works in that industry. What it does is shines a light on things that are outside of the day-to-day job itself. So things like burnout, things like climate change. The episode on climate change is a brilliant one to listen to. But there are so many great episodes that don't just span the day-to-day job of conveyancing that are definitely worth a listen. It's a really good podcast.
So kind. Thank you so much.
Amazing nuggets of information. Everyone, you need to check out today's Conveyancer podcast with David. You guys have been fabulous. I've loved this. Really, really great. And for anyone as well, that if you're in a leadership role, please do share this with your team. And yeah, this has been absolutely brilliant. Thank you both so much.
Thanks so much, Vicky, for inviting me.